What if God asked you to leave everything you have ever known, your home, your family, your comfort, and travel to a place you've never seen before? Would you have the courage to obey? This is the incredible story of Abraham, a man who trusted God when the promise seemed impossible. He waited decades for a son, faced trials that tested his faith, and was asked to make the greatest sacrifice imaginable. Yet through it all, Abraham never stopped believing. His journey would change history forever and make him known as the father of faith. But how did an ordinary man become one of the most important figures in the Bible? And what can his story teach us about faith, patience, and trusting God in difficult times? Stay with us as we uncover the remarkable life of Abraham, from his humble beginnings to the fulfillment of God's extraordinary promises. Don't forget to hit the subscription button and subscribe to the Bible Chronicles Studio for more magnificent animated Bible stories. Now, let's begin. Long ago, in a city called there lived a man named Abram. He lived a comfortable life with his wife Sarai and his family. But one day, God spoke to Abram and gave him an extraordinary command. Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Without knowing where he was going, Abram trusted God. He gathered his family, servants, and possessions and began a long journey toward the land God had promised him. When Abram arrived in Canaan, God appeared to him and said, "This is the land I will give to your descendants." Abram built an altar and worshipped the Lord. Years passed, and Abram became wealthy in livestock, silver, and gold. But despite God's promise, he and Sarai still had no children. They wondered how God's promise could ever come true. One night, God brought Abram outside and told him to look at the stars in the sky. "Count them, if you can. So shall your descendants be." Abram looked up at the countless stars and believed God. Because of his faith, God counted him as righteous. As time continued, Sarai became discouraged. She gave her servant Hagar to Abram so they could have a child through her. Hagar gave birth to a son named Ishmael. Yet this was not the child God had promised. When Abram was 99 years old, God appeared again. He changed Abram's name to Abraham, which means father of many nations. God also changed Sarai's name to Sarah. Then God made an incredible promise. Next year, Sarah will have a son. Sarah was very old, and when she heard this, she laughed. It seemed impossible. But God replied, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" A year later, God's promise came true. Sarah gave birth to a son named Isaac. Abraham and Sarah were filled with joy. After years of waiting, the promised child had finally arrived. Isaac grew, and Abraham loved him dearly. Then one day, God tested Abraham's faith. "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a sacrifice." The command was difficult beyond words, yet Abraham trusted God. Early the next morning, Abraham and Isaac set out on their journey. They traveled for 3 days until they reached the mountain God had shown them. As they climbed, Isaac asked, "Father, we have the wood and the fire, but where is the lamb for the offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb." At the top of the mountain, Abraham built an altar and prepared the sacrifice. Just as he was about to obey God's command, an angel called from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham, do not lay a hand on the boy. Now I know that you fear God." Nearby, Abraham saw a ram caught in a thicket. God had provided a substitute. Abraham sacrificed the ram instead and worshipped the Lord. Then God renewed his promise. "Because you have obeyed me, Your descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Through your offspring, all nations of the earth will be blessed. As Abraham grew old, he looked back on his life. He remembered the day God called him from Ur. He remembered the long journeys, the waiting, the trials, and the miracles. Most of all, he remembered God's faithfulness. The promises that once seemed impossible had begun to come true. Isaac had been born. A new generation had started, and God's covenant was moving forward exactly as he had promised. At the age of 175, Abraham passed away after a long and blessed life. Though Abraham's journey had ended, the story of God's promise was only beginning. And to this day, Abraham is remembered as the father of faith, a man who trusted God even when he could not see the way ahead, and who discovered that God's promises never fail. Moral lessons from the story of Abraham's faith means trusting God even when you don't understand his plan. Abraham left his home without knowing where he was going because he trusted God's direction. God's timing is always perfect. Abraham and Sarah waited many years for Isaac, but God fulfilled his promise at the right time. Patience is an important part of faith. Sometimes God's promises take longer than we expect, but waiting does not mean God has forgotten us. Obedience brings blessings. Abraham obeyed God even when it was difficult, and God honored his faithfulness. Nothing is impossible for God. Sarah gave birth in her old age, proving that God can do what seems impossible to human beings. God always provides. On Mount Moriah, God provided a ram for the sacrifice, showing that he sees our needs and makes a way. A life of faith leaves a lasting legacy. Abraham's trust in God impacted generations after him and continues to inspire people today. Encouragement. Perhaps you are waiting for a promise to be fulfilled, praying for a breakthrough, or facing a situation that seems impossible. The story of Abraham reminds us that God is faithful. What God promises, he is able to accomplish. Even when the path is unclear, keep trusting. Even when the answer seems delayed, keep believing. Even when circumstances say impossible, remember that nothing is too hard for God. Just as God guided Abraham step by step, he can guide you through every season of life. Your waiting is not wasted, your prayers are not ignored, and your future is still in God's hands. Trust God, stay faithful, and keep moving forward. The same God who fulfilled his promises to Abraham is still working today. Key verse: trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Proverbs 3:5-6.